If you've lived in Shenzhen for at least 1 year, clap once. If you've lived in Shenzhen for at least 2 years, clap once. If you've lived in Shenzhen for at least 4 years, clap once. Not bad. If you were born in Shenzhen, clap once. That's actually more than I was expecting. And the last one, if you've lived in Shenzhen longer than you had expected, clap once. Exactly. So that's one thing that's really interesting to me, because that exactly applies to me. 12 years ago, I told my wife that we'd be here for only 2 years, and now we have myself and her and 2 children and her mother. We all live in a house here in Shekou. This is when we were getting married, so this is my excitement about me finding a woman who would accept me as I am, so that was pretty cool. One thing that is really important to me is no matter why you came here, maybe you came here for an opportunity, maybe because you're a family member or a spouse of someone with an opportunity, maybe because you met someone here like I did, you came here for a reason. And you're not really sure if you're gonna be here much longer, and you're still wondering that. But the first thing that you're probably gonna do when you get to a new place like Shenzhen is figure out how you belong here. Is this place gonna be your home? Is this place gonna be your community? And in order to find a community, how do you find other people who are going to accept you? So who are you going to be in order to be accepted? So in the 1970s, there was a critically acclaimed and still popular theory today called social identity theory. What this means is your own identity, your own social identity, which means who you are in relation to others, is based on a 3-step process. The first process is categorization. Now, humans love to categorize things. They always love to put triangles next to triangles, squares next to squares, circles next to circles. That's just a natural thing that we do with items and with ourselves. This is a map of Shenzhen. Yeah. And one simple category that I think everyone in this room can relate to is 2 things. There are 2 categories of people in this city. One, those of us who live in Shekou, and those of us who live not in Shekou for some reason. I've yet to determine what that reason is, but by golly, one day we will find out why that is. When we move to categorization, we look to part 2, identification. Now that you know where the triangles belong, where the squares belong, where the circles belong, where the Shekou and the non-Shekou belong, then you start to adopt, you start to learn those behaviors, those customs, and then you start to do it yourself. For example, here's Shekou. One of the common behaviors for a person living in Shekou is an absolute unwillingness to go outside of it. I mean, absolute. One time I had a friend who had a birthday. I know, you're clapping because it's true. One time I had a friend's birthday, and he was in Hohai. Now, from Shuiwan to Hohai is like about 5 stops. And I thought, I don't know if we're that good of friends. If only he lived in Dongxiaotou. Another thing about a person living in Shekou is this. You've been to 3 places in the last 7 days. It's either G&G, or SeaWorld, or because you felt like touching nature, up Nanshan. Bonus points if you've been to all 3. Raise your hands if you've been to one of these places at least this last 7 weeks, 7 days. That's what I thought. And the last thing, I guarantee this applies to you as a Shekouan, Shekouite, Shekin? I don't know, we'll figure it out. Is you, Shekouran, thank you. The last one is comparison. Now that you know where you belong and the behaviors that you have adopted based on the group that you're in, then you know what other people do. You guys know about the Shekou bubble, right? The bubble. It's the bubble where you're not that willing to go outside of Shekou, and therefore you do the things that people in Shekou do, just like I described. And that's the 3-step process of social identity encapsulated in being a person who lives in Shekou. Now, why does this apply to me, and why am I so fascinated by it? It's because where we are from, I believe, really, really influences who we are. Let me explain it this way. My own American childhood. So I'm 38 years old, believe it or not. And in 1987, I was 2 years old. And at that time, there was, in the 80s, there was a huge shortage of nurses in the United States. So then they were looking for nurses in other countries who could speak English and provide those nursing services in different cities that had those shortages. One of the countries that was leading in this was the Philippines. My mom was a nurse at a time, so then a hospital in Chicago said, hey, if you can work in our hospital for a year, after that you can bring your whole family to move to America. So she said, why not? We want to give our children an opportunity to be able to have more to do, more opportunities itself, that American dream. So we moved to America in 1987, me, my twin sister, my older brother, and my dad, and my grandmother, and my mom. When we were going to school, we didn't know a lot of English, so then we would go to remedial English classes, me and my sister. We would have deals like this. We'd be taken out of class, and they would give us Clifford the Big Red Dog. Everyone knows Clifford the Big Red Dog, right? Oh, you didn't have to clap, but I appreciate it anyway. If you read it from cover to cover out loud without mistakes, the reading teacher would take out a big carton of goldfish crackers and give us 5 crackers for a whole book. Oh, that was cool. So then little by little, we were trying to figure out, and we were figuring out what it was to be an American child. I joined choir because as a Filipino, I have an amazing singing voice. Don't make me prove it. I learned how to play baseball, which is America's pastime. I joined a soccer team, and I realized I was really bad at soccer. I told my friends once I moved to China that they made me the designated throw-in guy, and they said, what is that? I said, well, that means you're the best on the team who can throw in the ball. And then they explained to me later that that meant you were so bad that that was the only thing they let you do on the team was throw the ball in from the outside and put it into the field of play. And on those soccer games on the weekends, they would have parents volunteer to work in the snack bar. And even my mom got a taste of the American experience because she had to learn how to make nachos in the snack bar. And she thought, why are you making all these crunchy chips really soggy with cheese? I said, just try it, it's great. She still doesn't believe me, but all those things was the American experience. We even had this one thing where we had a tree that died in our front yard, and then we had to pull out the tree stump, but we didn't have any means to do that. But my dad's coworker, Jimbo, he said, I will take that tree stump, tie it to a rope to my truck, and I will drive off and pull that tree stump off of the front lawn. And we thought that was really, really nice. Then I figured out he probably just was really, really bored and he wanted to see if he could do this. But he ripped it off and that was great. And this, for me, was the American experience, and it was beautiful to me every single day that I was there. We learned how to speak English, and we felt really American. And in 1994, at the age of 9, myself, my sister, my brother, my mother, my father, we all became proud citizens of the United States. We achieved that American dream. And then, 3 years later, my parents realized, wait a minute, these guys have never been back to the Philippines. They don't know how to speak Tagalog, which is the national language of the Philippines, and they don't know any of our family members. So that's what we did. This is us at 2 years old. This is the room that we grew up in. And in the first night that we went to the Philippines in 1997, and we were 12 years old, we slept in this very room. Now think about that. Where were you when you were 2 years old? I wouldn't blame you if you wouldn't know. But what my mom said is when we got into that room and we were settling in, she would point to the window. And she told us, look, you and your sister, middle of the night, trying to get some sleep, you guys would always climb up that window and try to play with us, and it was super annoying. And I figured, yep, sounds pretty right. But just the idea that we're connecting back to where we are from. I met all my cousins. So my mom and dad are both from really big families. My dad's the youngest of 11 children. My mom is the middle of 7 children. Put that together, we have about 200 plus cousins and family members, like more than there are people in this room. It's kind of wild. And I was learning again how to speak Tagalog, except poorly. And I was really connecting with my Filipino identity. So after 10 years, I found out I was American. And after 2 more years, I found out again that, oh, I actually am Filipino too. That's really cool. Of course, it was a vacation. So at this end of this 2-week period, we had to go home, not before going on a family vacation to a nice little resort with a pool. And this is something that I'd never forget because it was so peculiar to me. We're at the resort pool, and there's a lot of water slides, and it's like this jungle type of water slide, so you can't make your way up to the top without really being careful. My sister and I finally made it to the top of the water slide. And at the top of the water slide, we saw a little kid. I think he was like an 8-year-old girl. And then she was looking down the slide, as you probably would assume of someone that looks kind of scared to go down it. And then when we came up, she must have heard our footsteps because she turned around. And then she turned back around towards the slide. I guess she yelled at someone. And it's very American, typical accent. I was like, oh, she must be American. The thing that she said in English, perfectly clear to me, was, the Filipinos are here. let's go. My first reaction was, wait, where? It took a little while for me to figure out that she was talking about me and my sister. And this whole time, it's 1997, 12 years old, I'm a proud American, I guess I'm Filipino too. And then at that moment, this 8-year-old girl reminded me, you're actually not American at all, just by the way you look. She identified me as something other than herself because of some features that I cannot control on my own. Which is an interesting place to be in now, because I live in Shekou, which is an amazing place, period. Shenzhen is a very international city, like we just demonstrated right now with so many people who've come from so many different places. And there's this place called Intl that I'm sure you're all familiar with, and that is, for me, a perfect encapsulation of the internationality of this place. So on that road, we start, and there's a Chinese barbecue. Next to that is a Spanish tapas restaurant that recently closed. Next to that is a Turkish restaurant that is very much open. Next to that is another cafe called Emily's, that's right. Next to that is a bar and grill that's claimed by South Africans. Next to that is a Japanese barbecue. And next to that is a Starbucks. So that's like the perfect encapsulation of the internationality of this city. Whenever you're in a taxi and you're a foreigner, what is the first question that they're gonna ask you? "你是哪里人?" Exactly, where are you from? You know what I would say? Obvious, I'm American. The most common response to that is, 不是, 不是, 不是. They would say, no, you're not. And I'd say, oh, actually, thank you for pointing that out. Sorry, never mind. Then I'd have to explain that my parents are from the Philippines, blah, 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 blah. What I found out is I've always kind of had this obsession with making sure that I'm American and other people know it. And it took me a long time. I've been here for 12 years. And it took me until probably figuring out this speech that this is what I've been doing and why I've been doing that. Kind of weird, right? And that is kind of weird. Because everyone in this room are from different countries. And you are all proud of the country that you're from, where your family is from, where you're born. And that's great. But it's also kind of weird. Weird in the sense that sometimes because of the country that you represent, or when you see people representing different countries, you're going to put yourself in a bubble and say that those people from other countries are a certain way. It might be inoffensive, it might be just joking, it might be just an assumption. But it's you giving an identity to someone who you don't even know, who you've never even spoke to, whose name you didn't ask for. And that's been really interesting to me. I remember when I was maybe like 8 years old, my dad took me to get a cheap suit for a wedding. And then he realized that the tailor was, and still is, Korean. So then my dad said, hey, you're Korean, right? And the guy said yes. And then my dad says, we're Korean too. The next thing is he started speaking in a language that we didn't understand. And then my dad, as smooth as he is, went, yeah, I know. No, we didn't know exactly at all what he was saying, but my dad was trying to connect with him based on ethnicity in order to get like 50% off of a suit. We did not get 50% off of that suit. But the really interesting thing to me is we always want to get accepted, and one very easy way to get accepted is to connect with people from our country. It's the same thing that happened when I was teaching, and we had students, Chinese students here in Shenzhen who were going to go to school in America. 6 months later, after graduating, and they're going to UC Irvine, I asked how they're doing, and I've seen pictures, and they're hanging out with a bunch of other Chinese kids. At the same time, I'll say that, and then later that day, I'll go to SeaWorld and have a burger, right? So our allegiance is based on where we're from is really interesting and kind of weird to me. And it's actually something that is detrimental for my own future. Because me, I'm an American, my wife is Chinese, actually she's from Dongbei, and hey! And between both of us, we have two beautiful children who are partly American, partly Filipino, partly Chinese. And I really actually worry if they're going to be accepted. I worry that whenever I speak to them in English in front of their classmates, they're going to wonder why we're speaking English in the first place. I worry that when one day we'll move to America, if my mother-in-law is going to feel safe in America and feel accepted in America outside of a Chinatown. I worry that when my kids go to middle school, high school, wherever, that they're going to be seen as different because they don't know English slang. So it's something that I deeply, deeply worry about. But also I have a little bit of hope now. Because something that I've noticed, especially in Shenzhen, is this, and it's very simple, is that everyone is kind of from everywhere. A perfect example of this is baseball. Now, baseball is America's pastime, and baseball is also the setting for recently the largest signed contract in sports history. So one team signed a player at the tune of $700 million. To give you an idea of how much that is, if I gave you $700 million in single dollar bills and stacked it up as high as you can, you'd probably lose interest in that activity after a little while. But it's a lot of money. That player, does anyone know? Shohei Ohtani. Showtime. America's pastime being adopted by Japan. And there's a lot of great Japanese players, there's a lot of Korean players, there's a lot of players from all over the world adopting this sport that was originated in the United States. And he's from Iwate, Japan. Japan, which to me, as a high schooler, I know about from Naruto, One Piece, One Punch Man, and my personal favorite, Dragon Ball Z. These four are also the favorite of Zion Williamson, the 2019 NBA draft pick who plays for the New Orleans Pelicans. He also said on record that 80% of NBA players love anime, but will never admit it. So if there's anything I want you to take away from what I'm talking about in this red circle, it's this. Really 3 simple lessons, pretty obvious, not like wise or anything, but I just wanted to share. First, be yourself. Just take off the mask. Embrace who you are and really celebrate it every day. At the same time, let others be themselves. You don't have to give people their identity. You don't have to assign their behaviors to where they're from or the language they speak or how they're different. Just let everyone be themselves. And the last one, put it all together, be kind. All right? Be nice. And don't just be nice. Work to understand. Work to know their names. Look them in the eye and greet them with a smile. Because that's all we need to do here. Living in Shekou, living in Shenzhen, living in China, living as a person of this world, is just be kind to each other. And that's my time. Thank you.